into the state of Israel, Mr. Dimitri Sanchez, who will address us for about 15 minutes on EU-Israeli relations. And we had very positive advancement and progress just a few weeks ago. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing from you, and I'm very glad that you were agreeing to come be with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear Dr. Rochelle Fried Ries, co-president, Professor Emeritus Chava Landau, co-founder of the association, Professor Michal Alberstein, Dean of the Faculty of Law at Bar-Ilan University, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, קודם כל אני רוצה לברך אתכם עם שנה טובה, לאחל בריאות, שמחה, הצלחה בחיים. תפקיד שאני מאוד שמח להיות פה ביחד איתכם, חברי של האיחוד האירופי וגם חברי אישים שלי. It's a great pleasure for me to address this 30th anniversary conference of the Israeli Association for the Study of European Integration. The association offers a serious and professional platform for many years for information and in depth discussions about the EU, about the complicated issues that matter for Europeans, and of course for the EU-Israel relationship. I would like to thank you very much for the hard work you have done throughout the years. Mazal Tov, ליום הולדת 30. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says, בין 30 לכוח. At the age of 30, you are considered to be strong. So on behalf of everyone at the EU delegation in Israel, I would like to wish you continued strength and success in your important endeavor. It is also great for me to be back in Bar-Ilan University. I was here just a month ago at the Leslie and Suzanne Golda Multidisciplinary Brain Research Center to mark the fact that the center was awarded a 3.7 million Erasmus Mundus Joint Masters grant for a groundbreaking brain and data science graduate program, which is being implemented together with European universities. This is the first time where an Israeli university has won this prestigious grant from the European Union. So the ties between EU and Bar-Ilan University are deep and manifold, and we're looking forward to expanding them even further. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know better than most people, the European Union attaches great significance to its close relations with the state of Israel. And we want to develop our broad bilateral relationship and partnership even further. I should start with a major step which we took together last month, a major step towards closer relation. This was the EU-Israel Association Council. It met in Brussels for the first time in 10 years. And it was a very good chance and opportunity for both sides to discuss the multiple dimensions of the partnership between the European Union and the State of Israel, including on energy, climate change, education, health, research, trade, and many other issues. Our close partnership has also been reflected through an intensification of high-level visits, in particular the official visits to the State of Israel that took place earlier this year. Visits of the President of the European Parliament, Mrs. Roberta Metsola, who visited the State of Israel in May 22, and the President of the European Commission, Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen. She visited Israel in June 22. She made a very good speech in Ben Gurion University at Negev. Those who didn't read this speech, I would humbly recommend you to read it, because it is really something that everybody who is interested in Europe-Israel relations must know. From here, the president went to a neighboring country, Egypt, where she has signed a memorandum of understanding with Egypt and Israel, a bilateral memorandum, including also the European Union, on cooperation related to natural gas supplies between Israel and European Union through Egypt. This was also a major step our closer energy cooperation at a time when this is needed even further. And also we see in this step the energy cooperation a very strong expression of the European support to the cooperation between Israel and its Arab partners. I'm not saying neighbors, but partners, because we witness and we welcome the process of normalization between Israel and the Arab countries that started 2 years ago. This is, we believe, a very important process that brings together Israel and the Arab countries, and that set a new pattern of coexistence, cooperation, and going together towards a future based on mutual interests, on beneficial cooperation in terms of economy, and there's a pattern how to overcome conflicts in the region. So the European Union supports once again the normalization process, and we believe this energy cooperation in the Eastern Mediterranean also sets a new pattern. You are, of course, all familiar with our long-standing position on the Middle East peace process, so I will not dwell on it. I'll just, if you permit, say that we think that it's important to restore the political horizon towards a two-state solution, and therefore we welcome the Prime Minister of Israel, Yair Lapid's statement in the speech he made before the United Nations General Assembly last month in support of the two-state solution. We, the European Union, stand ready to support the dialogue between the sides, and we reaffirmed our proposal from 2013 during the discussions we had with Israeli friends and counterparts last week, on 3rd of October, at the Association Council. We reaffirmed our proposal from 2013 to offer an unprecedented package of political, economic, and security support to be developed with Israel and the Palestinians in the context of a final status agreement. You know that we have also welcomed the agreement on the delimitation of the maritime border between Israel and Lebanon. We believe that also this is an example how, with support of friends and partners, you know, who participated from the international community in these negotiations, important deals and agreements could be reached for the benefits of the people living on both sides of the border. So we welcome this, and we hope that this will give also new prospects to Lebanese who are in difficult situation to start improving the economic situation in the country based on the resources that they could probably find on their part of the sea. And once again, we support any cooperation between Israel and the Arab countries, because it's for us a fundamental step for the stabilization of the region as a whole, which opens new opportunities for regional, trilateral cooperation, joint initiatives, opening new perspectives for business, people, trade, travel, research, the environment, as well as in a number of other areas. We would like also to reiterate the European Union's strong condemnation of Russia's unprovoked and unjustified military aggression against Ukraine. I'm coming back from a week and a half long annual conference of the European ambassadors that just took place in Brussels for the first time since 2019, because in the meantime there was the pandemic, so conferences and huge gatherings were not possible. And I must say that this was maybe the most important topic, the topic discussed there, with all its implications: security, economic, and implications related to the world legal order, to the functioning of the international organizations. And we believe that this, once again, unprovoked and unjustified military aggression to an independent and sovereign country undermines European and global security and stability. As you know, the European Union has responded in a united and resolute manner. We adopted already 9 packages of sanctions against individuals, companies, and it's a huge package, huge set of 9 packages of sanctions that is the largest ever adopted by the European Union. I personally participated in the adoption of the first ever set of sanctions against the Russian Federation in 2014 after the illegal annexation of Crimea. In my then capacity as Bulgaria's permanent representative to the European Union, these sanctions at that time were mostly focused on persons and their assets. Now the scope of the sanctions is really unprecedented, but the underlying motives and idea behind these sanctions is to prevent the Russian Federation, the people who are taking decisions, and the economy that feeds the military industry and supports the army, to prevent them to expand their capacities in continuing the aggression against the Ukrainians. So behind the sanctions, we supported and we are supporting Ukraine with unprecedented humanitarian, financial, and military aid. Since the beginning of the war, 8 months ago, we provided nearly 20 billion euros to Ukraine. And this figure does not include the financing to the delivery of military equipment. Also, it should be reminded that for the first time in the European Union's history, we use the European Peace Facility. This is an instrument within the European budget to provide weapons and military equipment to a country that found itself under unprovoked and unjustified attack. So this has been aptly called Europe geopolitical awakening. The European Union welcomes as well Israel's assistance to Ukraine and its citizens, including the supply of defensive military equipment and humanitarian aid. We welcome also very much, and we highly appreciate the vote of Israel in the United Nations General Assembly on all the relevant resolutions. We have, I would say, very good cooperation with the colleagues in the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs in that regard. We understand the specific Israel position with having Russia on its northern border. It's, how to say, at least an easy neighbor you have. Yet another one. But we understand and we appreciate also Israel being on the right side in these votes in the General Assembly. Also, we appreciate the commitment of the State of Israel to avoid the circumvention of sanctions regime through its territory. And of course, we'll continue to work together with our Israeli partners, friends, in that regard. Before closing my statement, I would like briefly to address the myth of the EU bad reputation in Israel. I've served here, as many of you know, twice before as a national ambassador, coming from a friendly country with bilateral relations that are clean from any possible problems. So many Israelis, but also Europeans who know that my professional career has been tightly linked with the State of Israel, This is the only country where I have spent more time than I spent as Bulgaria's ambassador in Brussels. Asked me, how it is to be EU ambassador in Israel. It's of course different to be EU ambassador in Israel, and it's very much different from what have been to be Bulgaria's ambassador or bilateral ambassador to the state of Israel. I would not complain for missing love and support from my Israeli friends and fans, including in the foreign ministry and in the state administration. Thanks to my previous posting here, I know a lot of people. But being a EU ambassador involves standing behind a position that must be supported by all the 27 member states. In the European Union, everything related to foreign policy and to external action is based on consensus. So it's not easy also for us always to unify around the common position. So my personal commitment with my current posting here is to do everything that is in my capacities to further strengthen the relations between the European Union and Israel, to increase the understanding in Israel how much we are close and how much really also the people-to-people connections are developed, how much we cooperate in all possible areas, and to understand that difficulties and differences we have sometimes in some specific issues should not overshadow the overall excellent cooperation. Just to mention that Israel is the only country in the world that participates, which is not member of the European Union, is not negotiating possible membership, the only country that enjoys from participation in all our programs and projects under the European budget. Israel is a country with which we have excellent cooperation in areas like research and innovation, technologies, tourism, trade. Israel is the European Union is the biggest trade partner for Israel. So all these, I believe, is my task as well, but also yours, should be made better known to the Israelis in order to really appreciate where the European Union stands. Because when the Israelis go to their vacations in Europe, they don't necessarily think what is the European Union political position on this specific issue. Most of the Israeli citizens are related to Europe by their origins. Many of them have studied in Europe. Some of them met the Europeans to whom they married. So things that put us together much more than the things that divide us. According to a Gallup poll that we commissioned, 42% of the Israeli Jews have a positive image of the European Union. 37% are neutral, and only 18% have a negative image of the European Union. And more than 60% consider that EU-Israel ties are either very good or fairly good. So among those 60%, 54% consider they are fairly good, and 7% consider they're very good. So one of the tasks is to a bit improve this ratio among the group that consider that the relations are, in general, fairly and very good. The most recent annual midterm survey have possibly somewhat less encouraging figures, but it also showed a significant increase in the number of Israelis who perceive the EU as a friend of Israel. In fact, the number of Israelis who view Israel as a friend is the highest since midterm started its polling on that specific issue 4 years ago. So if we continue to work hard, and we'll do so, this number will continue to grow, we hope. because we strongly believe in the EU-Israel relationship and the many benefits it has for all sides. So once again, thank you very much for inviting me. I hope very much that the constructive cooperation we have with many of you will continue, and I hope that those of you with whom we haven't had yet the chance to meet will have this and will continue working together closely, because we have one and the same goal: putting the European Union and Israel closer and closer. I wish you a constructive and interesting exchange in the panel that will follow. I'll stay with you, of course, at the panel. And thank you very much.
So I have a difficult task right now, because since we are on camera and the association would like to actually upload that to the YouTube afterwards to the benefit of the Israeli public, I would actually like all the roundtable to be able to be on camera. So, Ambassador, can we maybe ask you kindly to replace your seat with Orit, Ganor, and maybe Marc? I don't know how we can squeeze in.
We can try.
But we can try. Yeah, it's going to be intimate. You're not on camera, Elizabeth, I think. Oh, you could be, maybe.
No,
so, Orit, Marc, you are out of the frame. Sorry.
Marc camera.
That worked for a meeting.
Okay. Marc, okay. Okay, so very quickly, we are now moving to our roundtable that will deal with EU-Israeli relations in light of convening the Association Council, and the question is what next? So good day again to everyone coming in here, and thank you, Ambassador Tancred, for your kind words, and I very much share your wishes for spreading the knowledge of how deep Israel-EU relations are and how important they are for Israel. In the way that I frame our relations, the EU is a strategic partner to Israel, definitely the second after the United States, and the first one in economic and scientific terms and other terms. So I'll shortly introduce myself and the aim of our roundtable, and then I'll introduce shortly our participants, and then we begin with the questions. So my name is Sion-Tzidkiyahu. I'm a lecturer at the European Forum at the Hebrew University and at the EU Studies Program at Tel Aviv University. I'm also the director of Israel-Europe program at Int'l Institute, and until last year I was the co-president of the association. So it gives me a great pleasure to see the big crowd gathered here today, and I wish to thank very much the organizers of the conference, Toby and Arye and Tahel and Alfred and Tal. And one of the aims of the association is exactly this: to try and to make the connection between the academic research and research institute and the government, and also the private sector. So we have a representative of the private sector here as well. And I think that 30 years after the association was established, we are in a really good time to show the relevance of researching and putting the research into connection to government relations between EU and Israel, to show the importance of research and of this ability to connect the dots between government, business, and academia. Okay, so our roundtable will take place for about an hour and 15 minutes, maybe a bit less. So we are standing between you and lunch, and I would very much like to give you food for thought. So we'll have something to discuss over lunch as well. And I think the conference has done that greatly so far. My main focus is on the near future of Israel-EU relations, as they're seen from different governmental ministries and the private sector. And some of the questions will be addressed to all the speakers, at least one question, and then we'll have more personal questions to individuals. So I will shortly present our great panel, and thank you so much for coming here. We have Talya Lador, who is the head of the Bureau for European Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have Lena Zeiger, who is the director of Bilateral Trade Agreement Europe at the Foreign Trade Administration, the Ministry of Economy and Industry. We have Marc Luban, who is the director of International Affairs, Chief Economist Department at the Ministry of Finance. Next to him, we have Tahel, Yashfe, the International Relations Division, Ministry of Environment. We have Orit, Ganor, Director of International Department at the Ministry of Energy. And last but not least, and a very veteran member of the association, Catarivas, who sits with us under two hats, both as the Director General for Foreign Trade and International Relations Department at the Manufacturers Association of Israel, and in addition, he is also president of Israel EU Chamber of Commerce and Industry. On the 3rd of October, the EU-Israeli Association Council convened, and as you well know, it was the first time it convened after a decade. According to the association agreement, it was supposed to convene every year. Its role is to examine the state of relations, to conduct political dialogue, and adopt decisions to advance the relations. And this is a political and diplomatic achievement to have been able to convene that forum after a decade. So I would like to open the panel, and then we'll also finish the panel with a question to our senior representative from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to Talya, that there is a debate, let's say in the media and among researchers, to what extent the convention of the Association Council was a matter of the trend that the EU took towards realpolitik and interest driven, and to what extent the new government in Israel under then Bennett and Lapid, and now Lapid is the prime minister, has made it politically possible to actually convene the Association Council. So my question is, what were the circumstances which brought to the convention of the Association Council? What was the weight of political factors, such as Bennett Lapid and then Lapid itself becoming prime minister, versus the geopolitical shift, such as Russia war against Ukraine, the energy crisis in Europe? And also, the second question is, what is the significance of the Association Council? Why was it important to have it? I hear different opinions here and there, that it wasn't such a significant, it's not such a significant body, yet other persons, see it as a very significant event. Please.
So thank you, Maya, and Yom Holedet Shloshim Sameach. And Dimitri, Mr. Ambassador, I want to say to you regarding the survey of Mitvim that you also mentioned that it's being improving, that definitely some of it is owed to your positioning here as an ambassador. I think we all know how friendly you feel towards Israel, and it shows. So we need to stay much longer so that the rate will continue to grow, because it's not as great as it should be. Regarding your question about it being political or interests, as always, it's a combination of both. What I think is, first of all, the EU is a political body. It is, I think, first and foremost a political body, and then an economic body. And here we sometimes have, okay, Danny, you can shake your head. But here's where I come. If at the end of the day, it's a political body that has great economic importance. So I'm not belittling the economic importance of the EU. On the contrary, you will see that actually I do more than that. I think when it comes to the Association Council, we had here three achievements, we say for us, for the diplomatic service. Number one is that at the end of the day, we have had on our requests from visiting dignitaries etc. I think, Rafi, from the days maybe that you were DDG for European Affairs, it already started that we need to go back to the Association Council. I mean, for years and years, Israeli diplomats have said this mantra that we need to go back ever since maybe 2016 or so. I cannot say exactly when. And then the fact that we have made it, that at the end of the day, all countries agreed. Not only did they agree, but they started pushing Borrell, the High Representative, to have the Association Council, I think is one achievement. A second achievement is how it was done, because for those who do not know, a little bit about behind the scenes, originally, of course, the Lapid, who is both Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, was supposed to travel to Brussels on the 6th of October, then it was changed to the 3rd of October, and then because of the very tense situation here in Israel, the security situation, Lapid had said that it would be actually almost impossible for him to leave the country as Prime Minister, and then we ended up really with a compromise and a very interesting mechanism that he did it via Zoom, and in person in Brussels. Besides the ambassador was Minister Stern, who was actually representing the government there. So I think it all shows how everybody wanted to do it and to make sure that it happens. Where do we take it from here? And here, of course, we have all the right people to answer this question. But I do want to mention that in 2004, I was a director of European Affairs in the ministry in our economic division. And then when we started thinking about the ENP, the European Neighborhood Program, and the AP that is part of it, we started to have meetings with Yossi Gal, who was the DDG at the time, with many ministries, and there was a very long wish list of all the ministry. I remember from the tax authority, from the Ministry of Transportation, from the Ministry of Energy, from the Ministry, we had long lists of what is it that these ministries wanted to do with the EU. To be very honest with you, when we now went through this exercise again before the Association Council, and we checked with the ministries, and thank you all for cooperating with us, the list was not that long. It was by far shorter. And the reason I think is twice, is double-folded. One is where Israel is, and thank you very much for the previous panel, maybe to tell us how good we are, and also the EU itself, and what it can offer, and the way that Israel went in those years without an association council, we still managed to do quite a lot. So I know the time is short, and I'm one panelist, I'll stop here.
Okay, thank you very much, Talya. So what I want now is to address all of you and to ask regarding the future. Okay, we had the Association Council, it was a celebration, political diplomatic threshold was crossed, and now the door seems to be open. I hope it will remain open. And what are, if you look into the close or immediate term, immediate in governmental terms, and the medium term, and I want you to spread the vision of the ministry, of your ministry, about the relations. Where can Israel take the relations next? So each one of you can present your governmental ministry position and the visions. And if you had a personal view also, in addition, that you would like to share, then I think it would be very good to know where can we advance the relations further. So let's just, I suppose, just go along the order. Danny, I would like you to be last to give the private section response. So, Orit, Minister of Energy, please.
Thank you. So, from our perspective, there is a great opportunity for further cooperation with the EU in the energy sector. I think it is well known, mainly in the additional export of natural gas to Europe. Israel signed a trilateral MOU with Egypt, the EU, in Cairo in June. And we're now, we had the first kickoff meeting to implement the MOU and to help Europe in the current energy crisis, helping Europe to diversify the gas quantities. And that's one perspective. The other perspective from my point of view, from the ministry's point of view, is regarding the Repower EU strategy, which was published several months ago. The Repower EU talks about three main topics. The first one is diversifying the gas sources, which I mentioned before. The second one is accelerating the energy transition and promoting renewables, which is, I think, common global challenge. And mainly in Israel, we have ambitious goals for 2030 and 2050. And the last one, the third one, is the energy efficiency. I think we have a lot of common knowledge to share. And maybe last thing, I think we have several projects of common interest with the EU. One of them is the EastMed pipeline project. The other one is the Euro-Asia interconnector, which had last week an inaugurational ceremony in Nicosia, correct? And we hope to see much more projects and joint cooperation between Israel and the EU as a whole. And of course, we have several interesting bilateral cooperations, so also in this field. That's it for now.
Thank you. Lena Zeiger from the Ministry of Economy.
Okay, so as the ambassador mentioned, the EU is our largest trade partner. So naturally, the trade relations are something that is, I mean, that's our mandate, and that's something that is economically very important for Israel. And we see that the trade with the EU overall, I mean, I have the numbers here, but I don't think I'll start showing strong statistics now. It's not the best, but just to say that overall, you should know that there's a trade deficit with the EU, so we import more than we export, and a big one, definitely a big one, and that's basically it's almost twice the import as relative to export. So that's a very specific kind of trade relations, and that's for trading goods, and then for trading services, actually it's the other way around in terms of exports vis-a-vis imports, but in fact, the overall numbers are very, very low. When I say low, I say that when we look into the pattern of trade of Israel with the world, then you would see that trade and services has been growing up steadily. The relative part of trade and services in overall trade, a decade ago it was about 30%, now it's 52%, the exports of business services. And then with the EU, it's only 40. So obviously there is a potential there to tap into. I'm sure my colleague from the Ministry of Finance will talk about it. And if we can elaborate, if you want, Maya, afterwards. In terms of our work program and what we do in Foreign Trade Administration, Ministry of Economy in general. So our job is to make sure that the implementation, I mean, the relationship is well functioning. We follow very closely the EU developments and the EU policy in different areas that have implications for trade and for businesses. We of course have the constant dialogue with the European Commission, both through its representative here in Israel, but also in Brussels. We have our attaché based in the Israeli mission there to talk whatever ongoing trade barriers or trade issues specifically relating to very specific issues. And of course, our resources they kind of reflect the trade pattern. So Israel, for example, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, these are areas where Israel is they are very prominent in our trade with the EU, and our resources in terms of following the EU legislation and working with companies, etc. They reflect these kind of areas. We plan in terms of our work plan for the next year and kind of going on. So for the formal kind of agreements side, we have a few specific issues which are bilateral, but in fact they are part of wider processes. So one is what's called rules of origin. It's fairly technical, but it relates to what kind of products are considered Israeli when you export to the EU. So Israel is part of the convention, which is Pan-European Convention. There is a certain update of rules which would facilitate trade. Basically, we need to update the protocol to association agreement related to the rules of origin. Then there is something coming up. Hopefully, I will here speak for the Ministry of Agriculture, since they are not here, on organic produce, and Israel wants to. It's going to be renegotiated due to internal EU processes, but Israel seeks to improve, basically widen the scope and so facilitate the recognition. Adequacy, something that again Ministry of Justice is not here, but this is something extremely important for
This is
trade.
GDPR.
related, yes, I should say, sorry. So Israel is recognized as adequate to the EU regime in terms of data privacy and movement of data. That is something that is as part of a wider process that the EU is taking with adequate countries, is something that is being reconsidered and needs to be reaffirmed. And then I want to two other issues, and sorry for being long. So Israel, as you know, has been taking steps to reform import and make it easier to import, allow for importers declaration instead of going to the standard institutes, for example. So the standards around food and cosmetics and consumer products are something is an area where there's an ongoing reform, and there basically the EU first of all would be a very large kind of beneficiary of that reform, but also we are really looking into increasing our cooperation with the Commission and with the EU and the dialogue on the regulatory level to allow for better implementation of those reform, and we think that the EU can play a very instrumental part in that area. And the last thing to say that there are many legislative reforms ongoing in the EU, as always perhaps, but some of them are we see them as very important and having potentially an implication for Israeli companies and Israeli and trade and investment relationships. So partly related to the Green Deal, for example, the CBAM, the carbon border adjustment mechanism. In the digital sphere, there are quite a few developments regarding norms being put now into legislation for AI, for cyber, for access to data. And again, our job is to analyze the data and to have the dialogue as needed with the Commission, but also to talk internally and to bring this information to the private sector in Israel and to make sure that they are well equipped with knowledge and prepare themselves for the future to come.
Thank you, Lena. So we move to the Ministry of Environment, to Tahel.
Thank you. I think that, before we are looking into the future and try to try to explore the opportunities that this council meeting brings to us, I would like to say a few words about the last decade. It also reflects what the ambassador said, that the relations between Israel and the EU were very good in the field of environment, were even excellent, because we had many activities in many areas of the environment, exchange of information, people that came from Israel to the EU and experts and professionals from the EU member states to Israel, with experts that wrote for us policy papers, guidelines, recommendation, etc. So the cooperation, the network that we built together was very good. And this explains maybe the reason that why we didn't ask for more and more things. And indeed, we acknowledge the achievements, but still we look for the future. And this is what Maya asking. Israel and the EU shares the same values even in this area. I saw that in the council, the Prime Minister said that we share values and interests. So in the field of environment, it's the same. It's both interests, our existence, given the climate change impact, and also values, because we share the belief that we should join together, join hands in order to tackle these challenges. So therefore, I see that we can go further. It's not only because the council meeting is more symbolic. It's the spirit that we can feel the change a little bit, but it's not only that. It's as the Ministry of Energy describes the new projects. It's more the war in Ukraine and the energy crisis that made the EU more involved with the Ministry of Energy. The same for the Ministry of Environment, I think. As the climate crisis will be more severe, we hope not, but as we will feel more, roads, lack of water, etc. I believe that the EU and Israel will have to cooperate together. And there are a lot of things that we can do at the lateral level, at regional level, and even in third countries in Africa or Eastern Europe, outside the European Union countries. I think that we have a good future in this regard, and a lot of work to do. We need to find the relevant frameworks for that, and maybe I will elaborate about it later. Thank you, Tahel. And last, and not last, but not least, Marc, the one who is your finance.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Mr. Ambassador. I'm from the Chief Economic Department of the Ministry of Finance. And I would like to start in saying that we consider the European Union as the biggest single market in the world. And we, Israel, would like very much to enjoy the full freedom as the European citizens. As you know, at the Ministry of Finance, we are preparing the budget. And with the budget, we have the arrangement, the omnibus arrangement law, which include a lot of reforms. Our perspective when we are dealing with the reforms that we would like to do is how to reduce the cost of living, to create competition. And then we at the Chief Economic Department, we are discussing that with the budget partners. And we always refer to the idea that we should try our best to create a kind of approximation of economic legislation between the EU and Israel. You know very well the Article 55 of the Association Agreement, so we use that. We use that in the past for example, for the PSD, Payment Service Directive, that we integrated. And of course, with regard to insurance, we integrated in our legislation the European Directive Solvency II, and this is the way we believe we should continue. It's to integrate directive regulation to the Israeli legislation. It will be the best way to create a kind of approximation of law, as I mentioned before. Now, you mentioned in your speech that we have an excellent good relation, and you mentioned trade. I agree. Lena mentioned the numbers and described all the trade product that we exchange. But as you know, the future is not a product, is not goods, but we believe that the future of trade is related very strongly to services. We're speaking about, you mentioned about innovation, technology, and this innovation technology enable us to import more services. We are services economy, GDP, employment, everything you can imagine. The services is very related, and the mishkalam.
Wait.
the weight of services in the economy is very important, very considerable. Now, the agreement that we have with the EU is a third generation agreement. It's a very old agreement. When I compare the agreement between Israel and the EU with the agreement that we are negotiating with the North African countries, with the East European countries, non-member of the EU, it's a shame, Mr. Ambassador, that we have this kind of agreement between two states that have many things together. When you are asking for technology, you come to Israel. When you need, for example, export of gas, you come to Israel. But when we believe, and I think this is interest of both sides, that we should take this agreement and to discuss negotiating a new comprehensive trade agreement that will include also services, not only services, but investment and many other things, because we are actually currently now under potential. Our trade between Israel and EU is under potential. I think Lena mentioned that. And so personally, I would like very much that you at the EU, you should try to make a DG trade to try to make a delinkage between the political aspect and the economic aspect. When you are negotiating now with Morocco a new comprehensive trade agreement, you have not mentioned the Sahara problem. So this is my personal view, but I think that many share this view with me. I'm not a diplomat, so I can speak freely. I will stop here.
Thank you, Marc. I think this is the first time that I hear a true sort of visionary next step forward on the table, which is a question that I wanted to address you afterwards, because, you know, for me that is following EU-Israeli relations, I hear sort of more of the same energies now new on the table, but it's been there before. Now it's enhanced, so there is vision there. I'm not sure what are the details, but we'll see them in the future. So that is definitely a new field. And in the other fields in Ministry of Economy and Environment, I hear sort of more of the same approach. So it's good if we want to continue and develop. And so, Ambassador, I will let you the opportunity to answer. Perhaps after Dan Catarivas, the representative of the private sector, will give his also input. And then, if you'd like to give a comment, then we will welcome that.
Well,
Please,
first of all, thank you very much. As you mentioned, I'm a veteran of European methods. I think I was probably the first Israeli student ever to study European studies before even the establishment of this association. It was 1977. Okay, and Professor Tobias was actually I consulted with him when to go and study after I finished mine, and he sent me to London. I don't know why. No, so, anyway, so
they were in the EU then.
they were there in the EU. Still like the
years.
country, but never mind. But no, but the LSE was a good place, no question about it. And again, so I've been to governance. I'm now with the private sector. I'm not with the academia, although I like it very much. And usually I like to be confrontational. Okay? So I don't like all those niceties saying, because I think that when we really tackle a problem, we have to really put the problem on the table. I'm very happy that Marc, which we used to work together, actually had mentioned the major issue at the end of the day, which relates to what actually Talya said, the relation with the economics and politics. Okay, so I probably, again, I'm now totally in the economic side, and definitely we want to keep it on the economic side. But we are realistic. Okay, it's true that the EU started politically, West European Union, they failed, they go to economics, and they go to politics again. Okay, but never mind. Now, I think that economy is the name of the game anyway. Okay, and what we're seeing is that economy is the name of the game. To try, by the way, to compare why 10 years ago, when you make this survey, nobody had yet big list. Now, don't forget there was one major thing that happened in the middle. Israel joined the OECD, which definitely changed the positioning of Israel and the relation with the rest of the world. And in a way, we replaced the EU by the OECD, because there it's an intergovernmental, there is no mixture of politics and economics, and then we can really look at be part of the developing countries and adopt the OECD, which is less, I would say, constrained than the acquis communautaire. And by the way, I just refer to Professor Landa, what she was saying. At the end of the day, the EU, like always, Professor Tobias reminded me, is a transfer of sovereignty, and we are not there. Okay, so it's much better to be on the OECD and to adopt and to go along with that. Now,
But it doesn't have to be either or.
it's not either or, but the limited resources of the people that I know at the government, when they have to deal with either they have limited resources, so they concentrate on the OECD and the EU is left aside. I mean, it's very, I mean, you cannot, I mean, you can travel to Paris many times. I know it's okay. Paris and Brussels are very close, but still, I mean, the attention span is on the OECD. What for the last 10 years, rightly so, by the way. I think it was a very, and I, as you know, I did contribute a little bit to that.
I will just know that given because of that we entered the OECD and we took upon ourselves some obligation in the field of the environment, we approached the EU and we learned from them. So, yeah, so it makes us closer to the
There is
EU.
no
In the
question.
field of environment.
I mean,
making
there
us
is
closer.
no, but okay. Now, from the point of view of the purely private sector, I must say that we, first of all, the fact that we have a trade deficit, I mean, you all know that it is really not important. Sorry, I mean, I'm not a government official. It's nice to every time open the discussion with the government saying we have a deficit, where that Israel has a surplus in its trade balance, so that's what counts. Okay, so the fact that we have a deficit on goods with the EU, okay, it's nice to be able to blame them that they don't buy enough from us, but that's not a real problem, okay? Because we buy machinery, we buy a lot of things which are, I would say, capital goods for our economy, and that's very good. And if the prices are good and they're even getting better now that the shekel is so strong and the euro is going down, so it's even better. And we're probably going to see even larger imports of capital goods from Europe than before. And that's very good for our economy, very good for our industrialists. Because why not? Now, services, and by the way, it's the difference between services and industry today is very blurred, okay? Because when we sell a machine or we sell a product with after sales service and a software that we have to update all the time and servicing. So what is exactly the difference is a big question. By the way, in our association, high tech is part of industry, okay? And by the way, by the definition of the Ministry of Industry, software, for instance, is also considered an industry, okay? But it's true that the big change of our economy is that it's moving towards more and more services, as it should be, because we are a developed economy. And in that respect, we fully actually back the Ministry of Finance attitude to try and reach a service agreement and actually upgrade the relation with the EU, because, as I said, it's really ridiculous to be in a really very, very, I would say, old age type of agreement that we're with the EU. I know this makes problems sometimes, but we have a very good challenge now because we have the Brexit, and we're now negotiating with the UK, which is not bound by Brussels, and we might probably advance with the UK much more in many other fields, and that could serve as I would say, as a kind of roadmap for the EU, because what we'll achieve with the UK in financial services, I don't see any reason why later on the EU will not align itself to this type of agreement. I know that it's an interesting idea that we move as far as possible. Do you agree?
I would be very surprised if I agree with
No
you.
problem. No, I know. Sometimes I do agree with the government, not always, but sometimes. So I think that it's a very, very important agreement, the one that we have with the UK, because it's going to serve as, I would say, our vision for what happened with the EU, if the EU is willing to move. By the way, we still have problems which are the result of the Brexit, because the EU and the UK haven't figured out some issue on rule of origin, etc. Those are real problems that Israeli companies are facing, either in exporting to the EU and exporting to the UK, and we encourage Ambassador the EU to reach an agreement with the UK to facilitate our situation there. Okay, so another thing which also is interesting is that well, I mean, Marc mentioned it very, I would say, openly. The Israeli government has put as an advantage, as a priority, the cost of living in Israel and the reform of imports. Okay, I'm not against, although people think that the Israeli industrialists are protectionist. We are not. I mean, we've been over that in 1985. is the big plan of, that period, the Hasifa, what's called the exposure, the opening up of the Israeli economy to import, etc. At that time, I wasn't there, at that time, the industry was against, but at the end of the day, now they recognize that it only did good to the change of structure of the Israeli economy. Therefore, we are not protectionists, not at all. We want fair trade. We think that the government in its open policy it's absolutely unbelievable that I think Israel is the only country where Ministry of Economy has a department to encourage import, okay? Where everywhere in the world, we are talking about, certainly nowadays, okay, after the corona, and certainly after the crisis in the Ukraine, people are still looking at what is your national interest, what is blue and white production, try to keep some of nucleus of local production for strategic region, and the running to import everything, we feel that it's a bit, they lost a bit the compass, okay? Especially that it's only unilateral in a way. I know that standards, I'm not expecting the European to adopt the Israeli standard for mutual recognition, but I think that a more balanced policy that will take care also of Israeli export and not only import from Europe. So I'm sure the ambassador is very happy with that policy. We are not happy with the fact that the Israeli government should have also a proactive export policy. You have some, I know, Catarivas, etc., but it's really very, very limited and very low. And we compare the Israeli tools for increasing export, those that even exist in other European countries, you will find a big difference. Okay, in Belgium, in France, in Germany, you've got much more programs that encourage export and also maintaining what is called local production, because this is also important after the corona, etc. I could go on. I think that one also point which is interesting, and we haven't solved it totally, maybe now with the new global architecture, which is totally changing, but I think that the global architecture that we knew until the 24th of February is totally passé. We have a lot of things that we can work together with the European, that we have the same challenges. I mentioned earlier all the defense issue. I think we should definitely tackle that at the highest level by cooperation, not only bilaterally, but the arrow that we are going to sell eventually to the Germans is going also to have not only bilateral dimension, but probably also a European dimension. So maybe the radar will cover areas which are not only Germany, and there might be a breakthrough in cooperation. I know that the French don't like it because they want everything done cocorico, so, but that's another problem. But definitely, I think this is a major opportunity in the cooperation between Israel and Europe. So defense, security, intelligence, things are happening under the table, but they should definitely be put on the table, and nobody should be shy of that. Okay, especially that now I know that I'm taking too much time, but you're now selling gas to Germany, so now we can really, things are really changing. If now Israel is selling gas to Germany, so the world has really changed in our relations. But anyway, so I think that in that respect, there are areas of cooperation, and I think that there are also many areas when you look at the global situation, for instance, China. I think that China could be a subject of discussion. I'm talking about the economic dimension between Israel and the EU, because we are facing the same type of challenge. We also are facing the same type of American dominance, okay, trying to dictate both to Europe and to us how to behave with China. Not that I'm a big China lover, although I do have some China experience. I think this is a subject, investment-wise, production-wise, supply chain-wise, that definitely we could discuss and we could share experience about China, because this is the major problem, okay, of the next, I would say, couple of years. Obviously, Africa, we mentioned, there are areas of where there is complementarity. We should look for those areas of complementarity between our business sector, between the European business sector, and try to work on them and to adapt the I would say that the government, they will follow up, and the financing, okay, we're not looking for financing from the EU. Thank God we are not a developing country in need of any help. By the way, yes, we could probably also join forces with the development policy of the EU. Why not? It would be beneficial also for Israeli companies to participate in those things. And I mentioned the EIB, which again is not known enough here in Israel, and the potential of working both with the EIB and the EBRD for the private sector in Israel, which I think is not explored enough, and there's a lot to be done on that. And the last point, because you
Very last
mentioned,
point,
although I
very
could
quick.
continue on, the last point is definitely, and the ambassador mentioned it, Europe has to understand that we are now part of the region here. I mean, with the Abraham Accords, have changed totally the geopolitical situation of Israel. And for the European to continue to bash us on the Palestinian issue, okay, it's fine. I mean, we shouldn't ignore it for sure. But there is so much potential of triangle possibility of working the private sector. And I know because I receive all the time requests from German, French, even Japanese, but we stay in Europe, of trying to see what we can do together in the Gulf. How can we work together in the Gulf? Or even in North Africa, because by the way, the Mediterranean policy or the new paper on Med policy of the EU has nothing on almost nothing on the Abraham Accord. Therefore, I will encourage Europeans to be a partner in what's changing here in the Middle East, and certainly Israel and the EU can work together for the benefit of the private sector of both sides. Thank you.
Maybe one short note if possible regarding the European Investment Bank. They launched several months ago the Israeli branch, which I think is a very positive step, showing the great importance of the cooperation. From our point of view, in the water sector, they're investing in desalination plants in Israel, and I think there's a great future cooperation in this regard.
Absolutely. And so, Ambassador, if you'd like to give some comments, then I'll give you the floor, and then I would do another very short round of other questions. Yeah, please.
Well, thank you. I'll start by the remarks made by Mr. Luban on the need to link the political and the economic. Here, the balance is very delicate because, yes, we applaud ourselves to have a very successful trade cooperation, but the trade in the European, setup is part of the larger European external action. The European foreign and security policy, together with the European trade policy, and together with the European development and cooperation policies, and all those internal policies who have external dimensions like climate, energy, and others, these three pillars form the European external action. So political aspects are there. Now, the main question is how to deal with this situation. Adding few remarks on Talya's excellent recollection how we got to the Association Council at the beginning of this month, I'll just remind that in 2013, the Israeli government decided to temporarily withhold its participation in the Association Council because it was not happy with the position the European Union has taken to its Council on Middle East peace process and on settlements.
The differentiation process.
Yes, and then it continued. At some point last year, 2021, with the very successful, I would say, visit of then Foreign Minister Dep't to Brussels, where he addressed the European foreign ministers. The question was put how to make in a way that the successful cooperation and promising cooperation between Israel and the European Union doesn't overshadow the concerns of those who were concerned with the peace process. And on the other hand, how not to allow these concerns of related to the peace process to completely overshadow the successful cooperation that we could have with Israel. And here, as the High Representative for Foreign Policy was mentioned, I would say that his cabinet and himself, they played a very substantial role in making the council possible. This is the only council that has a constant, permanent president. One of the vice president of the commission, this is Borrell, is permanent, the president of one of the councils. The European Union, as you know, the council has 10 formations. And these 10 formations, with except of one, are presided on a rotational basis by the country that holds the presidency. All of the other councils, justice and home affairs, energy, social affairs, economic and financial affairs, these are the ministers coming from the government that holds the presidency. The only council that is constantly presided by one person. This is the Foreign Affairs Council. This is in the EU law. Now, his task as permanent president is to provide for the conditions to be ripe within the council, that unanimous decision is taken to undertake whatever foreign policy related step, and one of these steps is related to reconvening the Association Council. So I must say, because in this last year I have seen the things already from the other side, not as a member state, but part of the EU machinery, that Borrell's cabinet worked very hard with the member states in order exactly to give assurances to those who were concerned that if we now go back to Association Council, their concerns on specific issues related to the peace process, relations with the Palestinians, settlements, will be somehow put aside and overshadowed by the cooperation with Israel. And this is what at the end of the day was achieved, that he prepared a document. This document has been seen by the member states, and the member states have agreed that they will proceed to reconvening the Association Council. And then I must say that 19 ministers or deputy ministers took the floor with Prime Minister Dep't during the Association Council, raising all of their concerns. Most of the statements were related to what are the prospects and what are the positive outcomes we're looking forward to come as a result of this Association Council. Those countries who had some specific concerns also raised them. And this gave everybody the feeling that having the Association Council is much better than not having it, because this is a platform where we discuss everything as it should be among friends. Now, the legislative framework you mentioned, and the need to be adapted. Yeah, the European Union is not always very fast when legislating, because it's a specific legislative process that is not comparable to the legislative process in a specific member state, even into a federation or confederation. It is much more complicated. But I believe one of the main features of this process is that it is based also on pragmatism, and it is based on the common targets put by the member states. When they agree on some target, then the legislative process has to go afterwards and to prepare the ground legislatively, the ground for these targets to be achieved. So I hope very much that we could work together with the Israeli government and the specific ministries, and to see what specific parts of the legislative process we believe are some kind of obstacles of our more beneficial cooperation, and to try to approach these issues and to tackle them together. So let's sit with your ministry and see what specific issues you believe we should tackle to the legislative process.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. So we have a few more minutes, maybe 10 minutes. We'll try to shorten the panel so we have more time for lunch, because we postpone all day with 50 minutes. So we won't finish. I hope we won't finish at 1:30, but a little bit beforehand. So we'll try to be very brief. But I'll put you two questions on the table, and one is related to the Abraham Accords that raised here from several angles, and I think that is also related to the shift in geostrategic, the shape of the geostrategic world and the world liberal order, and the war of Russia against Ukraine was resetting all the alliances, I guess, in the world, and that puts a question: where does Israel belong? But that's more diplomatic, political questions, and does Israel belong? We heard here in the morning, can connect also several issues that we heard throughout the day. Does Israel belong in NATO? Does Israel belong in the European political community that is being formed these days? Where does Israel belong in these shifting alliances? Are we a Middle Eastern country? Do we belong only in this region, in the alliances here? We have the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum with Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, Italy, and France. The EU is an observer. So I think Jordan, sorry, and Jordan and Italy.
The Palestinian Authority.
Okay. Joyful
And the World
Gas
Bank.
Forum and the World Bank. So Israel, I think, is moving closer and closer to the world of multilateralism. We see different examples for that. So where does your ministry perhaps think about that? And the other question is a bit more provocative, and I would put it on the table. If you'd like to address it, please do. I know it's maybe sensitive. It is my feeling that in some governmental ministries, this last decade was a decade of, to some extent, there's a shift to Euroscepticism. There is enthusiasm working with the EU because it's our major partner in environment, in economy, in other fields. But there was not much political impetus and push to advance relations because we were stuck. And I think there is now an opportunity, and there was also criticism by the academic world. Lador wrote about it with Choron Bardo, that there is no vision, and that's usually the state of affairs in Israel, in the government of Israel. There is no long-term vision. There is no long-term strategy, and we maybe think from one year to the other, from one election to the other, and there is lack of strategy vis-a-vis the EU. And since, let me define it as at least the second most important partner for Israel in many and in many respects, even the first one, it is time that the government of Israel, whichever government, have this vision, a long-term vision about the future of our relations with the EU. So if you could relate to both of those trends, very short, pick one and have a minute and a half to relate to whatever you want from those two questions. So let's maybe do, Tahel, would you like to begin?
Yeah, no problem. We will do it yesterday. Okay. I will split it to bilateral. The second question is more bilateral, Israel EU, and the third one, the first one is okay.
Try to speak.
I will try. We have here two channels. The first one is the first question refers to the regional platform or framework, and the second one is more bilateral. So I will start with the bilateral. As I said before, I don't think that the last decade was a lost decade. As you said, in the field of environment, we look inside the country. It's true, but we try to learn from the EU. The EU is a leading factor in the global arena, not only in our area in the field of the environment. Its environmental standards, the acquis, the directives, etc., are more advanced than most advanced as far as we know. Israel looks for the EU experience, knowledge, policy, and we learned a lot. And as I said before, the fact that we entered the OECD help us or encourage us to approach the EU and in order to learn and minimize the gaps, because we took upon ourselves obligations when we entered the OECD. So the last decade was a decade that it was one way only from the EU to Israel, and I think that now we can talk about exchange of information in the and we. 2 points. First one in this regard is the fact that we are more talking about the economic issues. Lena mentioned the CBAM, the cross-border mechanism, adjustment to things, and we have also the issues of trade, circular economy, and things like that. So it will enforce us to cooperate and talk about these issues. This is one thing. The other thing is climate change. I think that this could be the contribution of Israel to the EU, because in the past years, we used to talk with EU member states, most of the time, Eastern European countries, and even with the EU itself as an entity, and offer our services, our experience in technology, policy, how to use the water resources, the scarce water resources, the wastewater treatment, and desalination, everything that we can. We have experience, long-term experience, given the fact that we are trying to make it fast, given the fact that we are in a arid, semi-arid area, and we thought that it will be relevant to Eastern European countries. But these days, nowadays, we can see that even the Western countries in the European Union might need our help, even Germany, even France. So, yeah, okay, we can list all of them. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that we have our opportunity to contribute in this regard and to have something bilateral. And also to, okay, I still have the time. At the regional level, I will say just one sentence. As for the last decade and also for the future, it's true that the US is dominant in our area. This all the gas issues, agreements, normalization agreements. But in the field of environment, the leading force is the EU. In the past years and even today, to a less extent, but even today, the main frameworks for us as Israelis to meet people from the neighborhood is only European platforms, only European frameworks. We can meet our friendly neighbors. We can meet people that we otherwise would not meet. So this is an important point. I think that the EU could enlarge its participation, and we can talk about it, but I say the time.
Yeah, we are
So,
between.
yeah. And the Abraham Accords give us the opportunity to do that.
Okay. Thank you. I think we'll move to the field of energy, and then we'll go to the finance and economic field. So
Yeah, I think there's a room for both, for regional cooperation with our neighbors and cooperation with the EU. The EMGF is a great example for this kind of cooperation. Abraham Accords, of course, gave us a great opportunity of further deepening our cooperation. For example, the prosperity projects with the Jordan.
electricity for water.
Not exactly buying electricity, renewable, buying electricity generated from renewable sources in Jordan, and examining the option of selling additional quantity of 200 MCM water to Jordan, which was signed last year between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Jordan.
Do you see any involvement for the EU in such projects? Not maybe necessarily.
There's a great
Israel, but
interest from the EU in these two projects, for example, and I think there's a great opportunity for cooperation in this regard.
Okay, thank you, Lena.
Yeah, so I will perhaps refer to the long-term vision, as you mentioned, and whether there is, and what is our long-term vision as a ministry. And we touched upon already, my fellow panelists, on the question of services or potentially upgrading the association agreement. I would say that definitely in the long term, I think that's definitely something that is in the back of our minds. It's not on the front of our minds because the realpolitik is such that, as I think we all heard, that it's not on the table, first of all, in terms of the EU approach. But I should also add that it's in fact the internal discussions that there is a certain process when we approach, when we approach the question of having a free trade agreement or upgrading a free trade agreement in a certain analysis. And in fact, it's more complicated. It's not. It requires more detailed analysis of Israeli interests. And in our days, economic relations and investments and trade are done, as Daniel actually mentioned, and the OECD has done a lot of work on that, on the blurring of the lines of trade and services, but also on the ways companies, multilateral companies are doing business. And you can open a branch, you can open a subsidiary, you can just send, you sell a machine and you send technicians to do that project. So in fact, a modern trade agreement is as one as we are negotiating with the UK is something very wide, and it refers to many issues. So it's services, but it's investments and intellectual property, movement of people, standards, and nowadays basically it additional areas, sustainability. You would see like new issues in. So this holistic approach to trade agreements is something that is definitely, this is definitely our approach. But when you analyze with the EU, this is something that needs to be more nuancedly analyzed in terms of where are the areas, where do we see the advantage, where would we, in what. Indeed, again, I agree that once we complete, hopefully, the negotiation with the UK, we would be in a better position, for example, I think, to have such negotiations, because it's a certain journey, in a way, that you have to do. And also, I would say that there are other issues that are not really related to trade agreements and to specific, like, market access obstacles, or discrimination of Israeli companies, but there is, as we heard in the previous panel, the EIT mentioned that the Israeli companies, the high tech, the startups, kind of naturally oftentimes go to the US and not the EU, because you have 27 countries, 27 legislations, a lot of regulation, different languages. So there are other, there are many issues that are behind this picture that we look into, and we say, why do we not export that as many services as we would like to the EU? So it's not only about the legislative kind of the framework of the agreement.
Okay. Short time. I think we don't have time. Sorry, Marc.
We'll be very short, very short. With regard to your first question, I just want to mention what the US Secretary of State has mentioned 2 days ago, that we are moving from the post-Cold War era to a new era with regard to innovation, to technology, and there will be a competition, the war between countries that are very, very good and very fast in innovation and the others. And I know that your colleagues from Germany, from the Netherlands, from France, when they come to see me at the Ministry of Finance, they always say, we want to enjoy your high techs, enjoy your innovation. We'll be very happy to open our internal market for your Israeli companies. That's one thing. As you know, we are very connected to the US, and I think that they have also much to learn from Israeli with this regard of innovation. With regard the second question, I just want, as I mentioned before, I will be very happy that Israel will enjoy the single market, because it is a huge single market, and we would like to enjoy the full freedom in this single market. And as you know, there are some provisions in the association agreement that they were never implemented, and we can start only as a starting point discussing article, for example, 48, article 29, and as I mentioned before, article 55. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
One
Marc.
word, one word I would say.
Yeah, Danny, please.
Because the only thing is that, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, Danny, no, it's fine.
You asked why there is no policy towards Europe. I mean, but there is no policy towards anything. So it's not that we don't think there is no vision on anything. So it's not singling out. I mean, we don't have a policy. Sorry?
It's not only the EU.
No, you don't discriminate. There is no policy with China. There's no policy with Russia. I mean, there is a problem of policy formation of governance in Israel, and that's a major problem. So we should definitely try to have a government. Don't know who, which government, when, where, but definitely to form some strategy, some long-term strategy, and certainly with Europe, it could be very easy by saying we want to be part of the EEA and the European Economic Area and do everything that is possible. I'm actually encouraged, by the way, also the European to restart negotiation with the US, because then we don't have to choose whether we go for American standards or European standards. I know that the TTIP, right? That's what they now maybe it's on the table again, because again the whole architecture of the world is changing, and I'm sure that the Americans and the Europeans are now talking in a different manner. And again, the major threat is China. So in that respect, I definitely, but we can also do some first steps. I mean, I perfectly agree with Marc that there is digital trade agreement. Why the EU had a digital trade agreement with Tunisia? I don't know, but they have one, okay? And not with Israel, but that's a point. So yes, rethinking and also having the EU thinking what they want to have as relation with Israel. Thank you.
So looking out of the window, I must say that although you are right that we have no strategy, we are excellent at tactics. You see Israel, you can see that we've managed to develop with tactics only. I don't agree with Maya that it is a lost decade. It's a long conversation that we're having among the two of us. I will not go into it, but I believe that we wouldn't have been here without the previous decade, with all its problems, yes? On the issue of where do we stand, I mean, is Israel part of Europe? Is Israel part of the Middle East? Geographically, of course, we just need to open a map. Or actually, because we heard a lot from the academia here about the importance of the ties between Israel and America, of course. So in all of this, I would say we are this and we are that, and we want to be that as well. So I don't think if there isn't a necessity for us to choose, the fact of the matter that we are a bit of this and a bit of that is not, I think, at the end of the day, something that is. I'm not sure.
Good in
To be honest, I'm not sure that we are a bridge, but I think that we are a little bit of that, and this is it is good. At the end of the day, it is beneficial for the state of Israel, and this is, I think, what we all want.
Okay, we'll conclude with one last sentence by Orit, and then I will lead you to
One last sentence. Thank you. Maybe regarding vision. The vision of the Ministry of the International Department is changing the reality of Israel as an energetic island. And in this regard, we have several cooperations with the EU, such as the Eurasian Interconnector and the Eastern Pipeline. I'm talking about infrastructures and regional cooperations. And I think in this regard, the EU is a very important partner to make this vision happen.
One thing, Barak said we are. Used to say we're a villa in the jungle. I think no, we are now a duplex in a high rise, and this has to change. So this is a totally different situation.
Thank you so much for your contribution. It's been stimulating, I think, to think about the future.
Before everyone leaves the table, I want to take this opportunity of peak attendance to ask everyone, join this association. So not everyone in this room are members, and there are two reasons that I think you would want to do this. One is to show your support. As Tahel said, we all do this on a voluntary basis. I can assure